I think that's like the exact challenge with cancel culture, right? Like if you make it so people don't have a place in public for them to air out their ideas, it's not like they're going to stop having ideas. They're only going to have those ideas around people that already agree with them or already agree with shades of what they're saying. And so the echo chamber is real. And I've definitely watched it happen to myself, where you start with the kernel of an idea, but the only people you can talk about it with are people that are just like you, that already agree, that you know are not going to leak that idea out. And eventually that idea gets warped and turned and bent, and it's not good. But if you try and take those ideas out into the public, you'll be, torn apart just for trying to have them in general.
Yeah, definitely. And I do think that's a real danger. And I notice it with people who never get their ideas challenged because their ideas are just widely considered to be self-evidently good. So I've done some radio series called Future Proofing with a guy called Leo Johnson, who's very into environmentalism. And sometimes it'd be a program, I think we did one on the future of energy, and he was very like, we should just all go renewables and solar. And I was like, well, those are good, but they have limitations. And this is why we should also go for things like nuclear, which was actually, that was another topic in the Steel Manning series, was nuclear power. And sometimes we would get into arguments, and I would see that he was just not used to having to argue a particular case because he'd never met anyone who was prepared to say, I disagree with you on this, because it was either people who just went, well, I don't like the sound of that, but I haven't really got a coherent case, or people who were like, well, I don't know, I'm just going to keep quiet because everybody thinks this is good and I don't want to look like the bad guy. And actually, if I actually said, but, I don't think nature has an inherent value. Nature is valuable because humans value it. So that's why nature has a value. It's because we humans value it. And if humans weren't here, there would be no value to nature because there would be nothing to value it. And he was just baffled that anyone would say nature had no inherent value. You could tell nobody'd ever argued with him on that point. And I just think that's really bad, because let's say I'm definitely not right on everything. I'm sure there'll be things that I will in future years look back and go, I was wrong to think that. But you have to test your beliefs by having people in good faith really make it.
I'm totally in agreement. I spent 5 years as a spokesperson for Monsanto. So many people view this company as pure evil. And what I would find was I thought that I had to go down to the prison gym and pump iron and become so well adapted to this argument and understand every little nuance before I went out to the public to speak. And what I realized when I encountered people was that they literally had never met anyone that was like, no, I think GMOs are really positive and they have these other benefits to get rid of herbicides and here are these things. Like, never. And so for them, they literally, it was like water to them. It was, everyone knows GMOs are bad. Everyone knows that organic is inherently good. The only thing we're trying to figure out is how can we make organic cheaper and quit letting industrial companies run the world with GMOs. And so like anytime they encountered some different idea about that, it was almost too easy. Like I really did expect that I was going to be like, boxing and sparring all the time. And I had to realize that like my coming in that way only made it worse. In fact, I just had to just gently be like, hey, there's another way of thinking about it. And it would kick off all these discussions.
Yeah, I can imagine. That's it. Exactly. It's another one of those conversations where, I mean, I think it's always been that way. Certainly I look back when I was younger, I thought nuclear power was terrible. And all the reasons why I thought it was terrible were just, you go and you hang around the right people and they give you all the reasons you're like, there, good. But actually it had just come from, well, that was the kind of thing that people like me believed. And the people that I hung out with believed. And it, and it fitted with a lot of instincts, which are, nature is lovely and, invisible dangers are not good. It's not kind of very basic things. And all you have to do is plug those into nuclear or GMOs or whatever. And it's a very easy thing. If you don't have somebody coming back and saying, but look, what are we actually after here? Are we after providing enough energy for everybody in the world to live the kind of life that you and I live, where we have electricity and hot water and we're near a hospital and we can talk to each other across thousands of miles and all this? If so, then we're going to need a lot more energy. So how do we go about getting it? And then it becomes a practical question. Or, with GMOs, are we after a world where we waste less food, we lose less of it to insects, people can make a living farming, and we can all have access to tasty, nutritious food, a variety of food at different times of the year? Well, if we agree on that, then it becomes a practical thing of how and what are the advantages and disadvantages. Of course, then the interesting thing comes that sometimes you don't agree on those basics, and you realize that when people say I'm against these things, what they actually mean is, to me, the purity of food or the purity of our relationship with nature is more important than providing enough food for everybody.
Yeah, I find that
perhaps they go, well, if there's not enough food for all the people, perhaps we need less people.
And I think that's why, there's that phrase in philosophy, like the very first day you go to take logic class, they say, he who controls the definition controls the argument, right? And you think about, when you start thinking about what is it that we want, however you define what that is, whatever you can get everybody, or what is good, or what is, and you have these nebulous, vague terms that normally don't get defined, that without those definitions, you will always argue at cross purposes, because the thing that the other one side is trying to get to has nothing to do. It's totally divorced from what the other side wants.
Yes. And I think, that's one thing I find interesting, that sometimes arguments are not the argument they initially appear to be. So sometimes they will appear to be a pragmatic argument about how you get something or what's an acceptable level of risk. And then actually, when you start to pull it apart, you realize that's not the argument. The argument is, what are your fundamental priorities? Is it about all human beings having plenty of something, or is it about some idea of purity or whatever it is? And I think conversely, sometimes you get arguments that appear to be principled arguments, but actually are about different interests in society, that, what's good for you isn't always good for me, and so on. So I think for me, that's always one of the important things to tackle at the start, is to go, let's see if we can dig down, and by, as you say, trying to define what is the thing that we're arguing over, you might actually find that the agreement is one layer below that. The disagreement, rather, is actually below that. The disagreement is on what it is you're arguing over. What is the thing that we both want? Is there a thing that we both want? Maybe there isn't. Maybe we want completely different things, and that's why we disagree on this seemingly.
Thanks for checking out this podcast short. If you like this interview, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button and hit that bell so you always get notified about this podcast. And if you're really interested in conversations like this, you may want to consider joining the Articulate Ventures Network. To find out more, go to network.articulate.ventures.